What was supposed to be the next big thing, but totally flopped. Google Glass. I heard one of the biggest issues was that it was too heavy and felt uncomfortable, but they literally couldn't make it any lighter. I was creeped out by the commercials where that one guy identified a bartender's face and looked up her Facebook to get details on her interests before hitting on her by using his Google Glass. Edit. I cannot find the commercial, so it may have been, as comments said, a spoof. I have a pretty distinct memory of my father and I watching it on normal TV as a commercial and both of us looking horrified at the end because it was playing off as Google Glass making you suave and smooth. So maybe I'm mixing up the memory. I heard something along the lines that this is the real reason Google Glass was cancelled. It wasn't that specific. People didn't like the fact it had a camera on it. Privacy basically for people who don't wear them. That was probably just an example. Yeah, there were definitely videos going around from glass owners where others around them got aggressive about being recorded too. 3D TV. Clearly remember thinking, these companies have lost their minds. There's practically nothing 3D to watch. TV shows weren't available in 3D and weren't about to be filmed in 3D. Catalogs of old favorites would never be 3D. It's like the entire 3D industry was made for Avatar, which, while a little bit neat, I never intended to watch a second time. Reminded me of all the hype surrounding DVDs at first. Like I could watch a scene from Terminator 2 from any angle I wanted. Like I'd be able to watch any movie scene from any angle I wanted. Never ever saw that feature utilized. Edit. Thank you for the helpful feedback on multi-angle viewing. Clearly, I did not watch enough DVDs. The any angle feature of DVD was a hugely touted feature and I think I only saw it on the DVD for the remake of my favorite Martian. Filmmakers are storytellers that use framing, lighting, camera movement and more to convey their story. They're not gonna break all of that for some DVD feature. And movie sets aren't designed to be filmed from different angles. The entire scene is barely held together by gaffer's tape and baling wire. Walls and props aren't even painted on the surfaces not facing the camera. Lighting would have to be moved for every angle, etc. I realize there are exceptions, but generally speaking, a movie scene is a big illusion held together just long enough to get the shot. By the way guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It will help us out quite a bit, and if you don't enjoy the videos in the future anymore, you can always unsubscribe. Let's get back to the video. Google Plus was supposed to be the answer to Facebook. That was a lesson on how not to handle hype. There was so much hype around Google Plus, it was infectious. But they refused to open it up to everyone and maintained a very hardline invite-only system. Even once hype had peaked and there was a notable decline, still they maintained a small invite-only system. I remember by the time they decided to open it up to everyone the hype was well and truly dead and no one bothered with it. They should have cashed in when hype was high but they, I assume, got greedy, thinking the hype would just infinitely increase and people wouldn't get bored waiting to get in. From what I've gathered in this thread, Google threw a lot to see if it would stick mayo. That's basically their business model. I read somewhere, ages ago, that Google was willing to try just about anything their R&D people put out there, and if it didn't look like it was going to be a $1 billion return, they'd can it and move on. Also, a lot of things they cancel have features that end up in their mainstream projects. Like the conversation view, mail categories, trip thing, snoozing from inbox are all just part of Gmail now. I was at a conference about 12 years ago. Google presented a trial they were running in Africa because there was still very low percentage of smartphones and internet. So they had a call-in service where people could call a number and ask for information in their local dialect. The operator would Google search it in English and translate the answer back to them in their native language. Whoa. That's one hell of a service. The overhead on that must have been absurd. The background was that internet was coming to Africa via smartphones before computers. I think it was as much of a marketing exercise than anything. They said that when people in Western world would throw old/broken phones in the recycling bins, they'd be reassembled from parts in Africa and India. So most people's first interaction with the internet in those regions was going to be smartphone. It was fascinating. They also said that with older, dumb phones, there would often be one person with a stall who had a phone and you could pay to send a TXT to a neighboring village. And they had an option to transfer phone credit to other mobiles, so workers would use this to transfer money home to their family without having to travel back. Banking in places with no banks, pre-internet. Airship travel. These were the next awesome way to travel long distances. In fact, the spire on top of the Empire State Building was meant as an anchoring point for airships. The Hindenburg kind of put a damper on it, though. Anyone remember the Archer episode where he was aboard a helium, I think, airship and he kept smacking people for lighting cigarettes and stuff, repeatedly failing to understand it wasn't hydrogen. Lol, classic. Which part of this aren't you getting? Well, obviously the core concept, Lana. That moment of self-awareness was the funniest part of the episode, and that was a great episode. My favorite thing about the show is that it isn't clear at all when Archer is really confused or when he's just playing dumb. Every once in a while he breaks out in a moment of acerbic self-awareness that makes it clear he has absolutely understood what has been happening, which retroactively throws the situation into complete confusion. And it keeps a small but delightful bit of doubt around moments like these. Xbox Kinect. As a big thing it was a failure, but there was a lot of great niche uses for this product that never got explored. It's sad that Kinect didn't last long because it wasn't a major money mover. I worked in senior citizen services for a little while, and when we got a Kinect it revolutionized the place. It was shared with a few other SCCs, and we had it in Tuesdays, and a Microsoft guy would come with it to help set it up and instruct the members. They loved it. It was so great to watch them bowling and playing keeper in a soccer game, or playing some of the simple little mini games. Some of the seniors who would just sit there all day got up for only the Kinect. It was nice. As someone that is going into the rehab field, the Kinect and Wii can make for some awesome rehab activities and group activities in that demographic. It would be nice if they would have kept them around just for the rehab uses. When I worked with adults with disabilities, they loved the Wii. It's a great way to get up and moving even if they were usually immobile, improved into communication skills, strengthened hand-eye coordination and attention span, and encouraged goal-oriented planning and critical thinking. People see cartoon bowling and think it's just a video game, but it's so much more than that. The Panama Papers. Edit. Since I have your attention, I'd like to direct you to Isage's response here. Seriously. The sad thing is, we all knew it would be like this. Another sad thing is that it is all still happening. Oh, and the journalists who did this mysteriously died. Daphne Caruana Galizia was killed in my country, and just now, almost 4 years later, are the assassins employed being prosecuted, and the real people ordering the shots starting to be revealed. The government is basically the same that it was 4 years ago, so they have a vested interest in keeping things quiet. Unsurprisingly, they denied the killers pardons for their other murders in exchange for revealing who actually ordered her assignation. If you are unaware, Daphne Caruana Galizia and her son particularly were involved in the Panama Papers and other international conspiracies. This is what I'm talking about. Yes, I find it odd that people say that the Panama Papers were, not a big deal. The EU and USA have changed their banking laws. Countries have started talking about changing how to tax multinational corporations like Facebook. A lot of former tax havens have closed their loopholes. Ministers and head of governments have fallen. Hundreds and hundreds of people have been prosecuted. Journalists have been killed. Banks have been prosecuted and even shut down. The Panama Papers is a big freaking deal. It is just not so well reported because it is complicated and the effect is in many different countries. This one might be a bit obscure just because I've only ever met one other person familiar with it, but Google's Project Era modular smartphone was looking like it could have been the end all be all of smartphones. Based off the Phonoblock's idea of having a Lego-like hot swappable module phone, the idea was that you could switch out any components of the phone on the fly. Camera, fingerprint scanner, even different quality screens. Conceptually, it really looked like it could take over the phone market, as it would lead to people not having to buy whole new phones anymore, but rather replacement or upgraded parts to a phone they already liked, thereby reducing costs and increasing utility. You don't want a phone with 5 cameras that inflate the cost unnecessarily? Just buy a 1 camera module. You want a 1440p Super AMOLED screen to replace your 720p regular screen. Buy one and swap it in. However, like many Google projects, it died off for myriad reasons and the long-standing era of $1,000 smartphone slabs lived on. Yes, I remember this. I was very excited when they announced it. I wonder what happened. I guess maybe because of comparability issues with multiple hardware systems from a multitude of manufacturers who have their own protocols, but damn wish they went through with it. Embedded code is pretty hard to get right when you're working with a single processor. I imagine it's worse when you want components to be hot swappable. Star Wars: The Old Republic was supposed to be the World of Warcraft killer. It was honestly a good game, but they botched it on launch by having too many servers, leaving them all feeling vastly underpopulated, making what little endgame content there was worthless, since you couldn't find groups to do it with. Edit. Lot of responses saying a lot of games market themselves as the WoW killer. This is true, but a lot of the hype wasn't coming from the marketing in this case. It was actually coming from players participating in the beta. And rightfully so, because the early game is solid and there was a good population on the beta server or servers. Star Wars Galaxies had a huge user base, and then was bought out and ruined to make it more like WoW. That was before Old Republic. SWG wasn't bought out, it was always developed by So was just kind of incompetent, as can be seen in how they took the golden goose of EverQuest and basically handed it off to Blizzard, leaving Ek 2 to suffer in obscurity compared to that other fantasy MMORPG that launched November 2004. Not sure if this one has totally flopped yet, but I noticed, while in Costco the other day, that there are no longer any curved TVs. If Costco is no longer carrying them, then I think we can assume they're going the way of the dodo. And yet curved monitors are popular right now, must be the viewing angle is a better if it's just one person. Exactly. At the focal point, they reproduce colors better than a flat monitor. These screens are small enough, relatively speaking, that you can only have one person truly at the focal point. Everybody else on the couch is getting a worse experience than if it was just flat. You also are forced to have your seat exactly the right distance from the TV. Much harder than a monitor setup where the differences between desks is relatively small and you can easily move it to the right spot. Curved monitors can also reduce eye strain, since in the right position the distance from the center of the monitor to your eyes is the same as at the edge, so you don't have to macro adjust your focus all the time. Hydrogen cars were a promising new form of motorized vehicle. They were supposed to be incredibly good for the environment, emitting only water as the exhaust. They exist, but not like how some people imagined. I was a pretty big hydrogen car believer at the time. There are some hydrogen stations, but mostly centered around California. Thing is that the hydrogen is quite expensive and not very efficient compared to smaller engines, hybrids, and EVs. The hydrogen is also somewhat inefficient to produce, store, and distribute as well. You can actually get a hydrogen car though, they're out there. The Toyota Mirai is a really good example. Out of all hydrogen cars, that one is definitely most popular. In fact, Toyota pays for $15,000 worth of hydrogen in your first few years of ownership, since it's so expensive. This means that for your first 3-ish years of owning one, you might not have to pay a penny in fuel. As you can see, I'm still a hydrogen advocate. Don't expect to be able to take it very far from your nearest hydrogen station though. Edit, a word. Hydrogen embrittlement is such a massive of a problem to overcome. That and a hydrogen car is just an EV with extra steps. It uses electrolysis to make electricity which powers the electric motor. A BEV doesn't need that. Just store electricity in the battery and has direct access to it. Easy. That's why BEVs are winning. We work/we live. A classic case of something that was a good idea and actually at the right time, but was made to flop by being run into the ground by an unbalanced leader who was right about the ideas being timely and useful, but completely overselling it and taking a bunch of salivating venture capitalists down a primrose path. It also didn't help that so much of it was really a sham and almost a Ponzi scheme. It's not always about being the wrong idea or even the right idea at the wrong time. Sometimes it's just led by the wrong person. It was basically propped up by the founder's new age "we want to elevate consciousness." That's what killed it. He kept saying, it's not real estate, it's a new way of thinking that will revolutionize the world. It's just real estate. It's a hipster landlord that's 3x more expensive than existing daggy landlords because they have inner glass cubicles, fruity water, designer lounges, and the same Wi-Fi password in every office. For tiny startups who need to regularly meet external clients downtown and want hip offices to meet in without having to ask for the new Wi-Fi password in each building, it's so chaotic. Paperless office. Over and over again, our managers reminded us that we are working in a paperless office environment. Never happened in my very large company. I have not heard paperless office in years now. I think all these Zoom meetings and work from home has brought this much closer to a reality. I know my job has become paperless. The only time I have to deal with any actual paper anymore is for government related items. I work in a municipality. Physical copies of not important documents are still pretty much a thing. You even have to print something, sign it, scan it and then send it to whoever needs it. Because apparently me using my corporative mail address, copying my boss, and sending a notification through the inner system that my office was sending a document to the direction of finances is not enough. No. A piece of paper needs to physically go to the second floor. It should be enough, but somewhere along the line there's that someone/department that doesn't recognize this, and their refusal to accept it means that no one is willing to go through the hassle of changing their processes. Whatever happened to those curved televisions? I remember seeing one on an advert a few years back but haven't seen or heard about them since. I worked in a department store where this curved Samsung was on display, where you could watch 2 shows at the same time on one screen. You had to be wearing special glasses as it was all to do with refresh rates. I remember thinking it would be the next big thing. Parents watch TV whilst kids play PlayStation, but I've not seen anything remotely similar since. PlayStation TV. Full screen 2-person simul view. WTF, that is the most ridiculous idea when there are literally more screens than there are people in America. If you were wealthy enough to buy that hot new tech, you are wealthy enough to just buy 2 TVs. What did they do for sound? Was everyone just wearing headphones and special glasses? Might as well all be sitting around a living room with Oculuses on their heads, the modern family lol. What were they thinking? Betamax. Betamax was actually pretty big for a while. VHS just surpassed it because the tapes had longer play times initially via extended play modes, which meant you could fit an entire football game on one tape, something you couldn't do on beta initially, but was a big deal because recording things off TV to watch later was the primary purpose of these tape recorders. Pre-recorded content like movies wasn't a big draw at first, and they were really expensive to buy. Like $100 or more for one movie. Sony introduced longer tapes later on, but it was too little too late. Obviously there's a myth that VHS won because of but that's not true. There was on beta. Sony created the format, but you can't dictate what the tapes are used for. They weren't in a position to allow or disallow their format any more than JVC was with VHS. VHS won because the tapes could fit more content than beta. Fall Guys. Then Among Us rose to power and choked the competition. Fall Guys is that weird thing where you can see how it could be huge, but it's just too limited and repetitive, and winning is way too difficult for most players, so it ends up unsatisfying. Throw in the just too expensive to buy with gamma play money costume microtransaction stuff, and I don't see how it could be anything but a flash in the pan. Watch Dogs apparently meant to have next gen graphics turned out to be. What's even sadder is in the game code you can actually activate the next gen graphics mode and play it on PC. I do think if the XBONE/PS4 didn't have the mobile CPUs and went with more dedicated hardware, they could have easily pulled it off and managed to make the base game look like that normally. But because of their poor hardware, game graphics were held back on those systems. Wasn't that an issue with the new graphics being disabled in the source code accidentally? Not accidentally, they did it on purpose. The reason being that, while PC could mostly handle them, the consoles at the time could not handle them at all. So instead of offering two different experiences, they just locked away the graphics. Theranos. Reading the story of that company and the ideas of its CEO, it's actually kind of sad it all blew up. As a biologist myself, it's pretty easy to see how her idea was both a good and timely one, and one that was never ever going to work the way she was going about it. She didn't have enough knowledge to get on the right track initially, which is not uncommon, but she refused to learn any more about what she needed to know, no matter how many people were desperately trying to tell her the initial idea was just over. She got on the wrong track right away and doubled down every time she hit a problem because of it. And she was enabled by a frenzy of venture capitalists who were obsessed with becoming near instant multi-billionaires by investing early in the next Google/Facebook/Uber. I think even if she did ever doubt the project, she was either in too deep with those investors or they wouldn't even let her change tracks. It became like a shared delusion. A single drop of blood is not a large enough sample size for many, if not most, common blood tests. The entire premise was faulty. Graphene. It was supposed to be the best material. Many times stronger than steel and lighter, but after the initial hype, never heard about it again. Graphene can do anything except leave the lab. It has left the lab in some cases. For example, I have graphene headphones. Technically, it's a material called graphene Q. Difference is that graphene can't easily be formed into a driver, so this material mixes oxygen in to overcome that barrier. So far, it's the only headphone that uses graphene as the base material for the driver. The others have graphene flakes that are adhered to another material that forms the driver. Outside of that, as far as I'm aware, pure graphene still hasn't been created larger than a small flake. I'd happily increase that awareness if someone wants to point me in the right direction. Nextdoor doesn't appear to be taking off all that much. I don't know about this, it's pretty well known and popular, at least in my area. Of course, it's an absolute cesspool. An innocent question about recommended plumbers can turn into a political debate in about 2 comments. And for some reason neighbors like to mark everything as urgent, like Myring picked up a man walking by my driveway about 20 minutes ago, possibly carrying a bag of groceries, but could have been stolen. Beware. We had one of those a couple nights ago. Suspicious car pulled into the driveway at 12:34 Main. A man walked past the vehicles, went to the door, then took off. Be aware, lock your car doors, and don't open your doors for anyone you don't know. Apparently Karen has never ordered pizza from Domino's and thought we were under attack. We haven't had a useful post yet. My dad came to my house for the second time ever to bring my son a birthday card. He showed up 2 doors down, very similar looking house, knocked, waved at the kid in the window, and when he realized it wasn't his grandson, he left, coming to the right house next. After he left my house, I saw in our group that the neighbor had posted all kinds of warnings about the sketchy dude who had showed up at her door holding something, the birthday card and a bottle of Pepsi, trying to break in, sending them into complete ninja mode. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys for staying with me till the end. If you enjoyed watching this, you might as well watch these too.